I've been avoiding discussing this with you for the longest time, but fuck it. Today we're going to be talking about emulation, which is a very controversial topic. So hit the like button, subscribe, and let's get right to it. Okay, so the very first aspect of emulation that I have to tell you is the most obvious one: accessibility. How many are the games that are either locked away behind very old system or cost hundreds of bucks for you to get an original copy? More than you can count. And there's also the aspect of translation, because you see nowadays games tend to get released on every single language. Well, at least the most widely used languages on this planet. But decades ago, that wasn't the case. And the reason why I'm leaving Clock Tower play on screen is because first, this is the game that I'm currently playing, Clock Tower Rewind, and also because it had been locked away behind a language barrier for years. The only reason people were able to play this before this release was that some people took it upon themselves to translate the game so we could play it, and the only way to do it would be, well, emulating. And this goes double, actually triple, quadruple, for one of Hideo Kojima's best games ever. And if you guessed, if you thought the game I'm talking about is Policenauts, then, well, have a cigar, my friends. It's the very same. You see, I was with the Junker headquarters people as a support, not a translator, for quite a number of years before that translation got released. It was spearheaded by Mark Laidlaw, and later down the line, this guy called Slow Beef, his user handle Slow Beef, came along, and apparently he was the final piece needed to crack some of the code that they literally had to fuck around with in order to get things rolling. And it's one of the best translations I've ever seen. It's one of the best translations I've ever seen. There are many things that are not exact translations, but that's called a localization. Those are things that you change around to better suit the target audience. Can never make a one-to-one translation in its entirety. And I say this as a professional translator myself. And we never would have gotten to play this. And it's one of the greatest games you could ever play. That is just one other example. There's this game called Famicom Tantei Club 2, I believe, under Super Nintendo. It's also a visual novel, and it's one of the greatest Super Nintendo games ever because it's so entertaining. It revolves around you investigating a murder. The graphics are super well done. The story is very interesting. The pacing of the game is amazing. And that game would never get translated officially, not even if hell froze over 5 times in a row. And those are very, very few examples of the games we would never, ever get to play otherwise. The games we would never get to play if it hadn't been for emulation, because it was up to people, people like you and I, passionate fans who thought, hey, I love this thing so much that I'm gonna take my own personal time. Even though I had to work, I may have kids, I have my obligations like everybody else, but I'm gonna take a lot of my time and work on this. If you've been with the people from Junker headquarters while they were translating Policenauts, then the gargantuan, the Herculean ordeal that it was getting that thing done. And the next aspect, of course, is image quality. Now, if you've been around with me, if you've been around the channel for a long time, then first, thank you. And second, just take a look at some of the videos that I made that were homemade remastered. I picked every single game, I bumped the graphics, I did all the necessary modifications and testing to make sure it looked pristine. I did this with Metal Gear Solid, I did this with Dirge of Cerberus and Vagrant Story and a couple of other games. And if you just head over those videos once we're done, you're gonna see that those games, they look so much better. They look fucking amazing in comparison to maybe a one-to-one release, just like that absolutely shitty Metal Gear Solid 1 Master Collection that Konami released. It's in its original release, it was absolutely pathetic. I don't know how it is nowadays, but this also falls into that fucking category of, oh, they're gonna fix it later. Nuh-uh. There's no fix it later. Release it in a very good state. I'm not saying that corrections cannot be made, but the state in which the Master Collection was released was nothing short of laughable, and they charged full price for that. Whereas if you've hung around emulation enough, then you've been playing those games at a much higher graphical quality. Some people would try defending this, arguing that, well, actually, Master Collection was never meant to be a remaster, so what are you talking about? Well, my friend, what I'm talking about is the fact that enhancing those games' image and making them look even better than they did when they were released would be fucking piss easy. Would have been fucking piss easy, and Konami didn't bother doing this. If anything was done, it was done by the community. You know, that's the whole fucking problem. The community having to do things, which, in a way, you know, isn't very far removed from emulation. You know, the community taking upon themselves to do something that, you know, video game publishers did not. Do you see what I'm getting at? You know, put everything together, piece everything together. Now, one of the reasons why I also wanted to leave Clock Tower running on screen is because this was a very good release. First of all, they're not charging $60 for this, right? Not comparing to Metal Gear Solid, but they're not charging $60 for this. You know, they're not going full price. And second, this is finally a way in which I'm going to say standard players, as in people who don't use emulation, they only get official releases for things. And now those people will also get to enjoy the game in English, which is one of the most widely used languages on this planet. And not only that, but it also made sure to add quite a number of different extras that, you know, warranted enough value for even people who've played the game and beaten the game 100 times to actually think, hey, you know, this is a cool addition. You know, there's some extras, there's the animated scenes, there's all the backgrounds, all the cool stuff. So yes, this was a very good release. Now, this is something I don't think I would have to explain, but there's always that one motherfucker. You know what I'm talking about, who I'm talking about, that one motherfucker. The difference here is remastering this game graphically would be different because we're talking about 2D sprites. A game that's done in full 3D like Metal Gear Solid, working on it would be a very different thing. Like I said, man, if you know something about emulation, you can get those games in pristine state very easily. So much so that even if you're using RPCS3, which is an emulator that's still in its alpha stage, not even beta, alpha stage, you can get those games to run with a stupid visual quality and in a very stable fashion too. And now talking about the preservation of things, of course, video game discs, they have a lifespan. No matter how good you take care of them, they're gonna start failing. You know, I've had that happen to me. Even if I took very good care of my discs, kept them in a safe place, you know, well stored, then, you know, they do begin borking up. And prices in retro gaming have done nothing but go up for quite a number of years now, so you can imagine what that represents for the gaming community as a whole. So many things that would have been otherwise completely lost to time, to degradation, if it hadn't been for emulation. Tell me, how many people do you think that have gotten to know Final Fantasy through emulation? Think about it. If you said, well, I think at least half or most of them, well, we don't have official numbers, but, you know, just look at the gaming community as a whole, then, you know, you probably wouldn't be very far off from the truth. Even though if some titles are available or easily available on different platforms, there was a time where they weren't, you know, and you can bet your ass off that many people who've played the Final Fantasy remakes, you know, both the remake and the rebirth, and are about to play the third one that's in development, they began doing so because of emulation. Why? Because, well, those games, the original game, at a certain point in time, wasn't easily available without you having to spend hundreds of bucks to get them. Or when they're making a Panzer Dragoon special and they finally talk about Panzer Dragoon Saga. Yeah, sure, they're going for original games, they're going for original hardware. The fuck they are. Am I against this? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, you know, whenever I go retro, I use emulation. For example, do I own every single piece of Metal Gear Solid video game in media physical format? Yes, I do. I've actually shown my collection quite a number of times on our community posts. But am I gonna hook up a PlayStation 1 to do this? No, I'm not. Why? If I emulate it, first, it's easier. Second, I can make it look a billion times better, like I've shown in one of my videos. As a matter of fact, it was a Japanese playthrough of the game that I made. You know, I knew a lot of people wanted to see the game being played in Japanese, so I thought, well, hey, let's do it. And not to mention, the game was in widescreen. Yes, you know, it wasn't just that stretched out thing that your grandmother would look at and think, hey, oh, this is nice, it's filling up the whole television. No, it was true widescreen through emulation hacking, and it looked fucking amazing. Now, of course, some details, you know, mostly 2D overlays, They didn't look exactly spot on, but I cannot think of a single fucking person who would go, well, if those things are not spot on, then I don't want the game in 4K and true widescreen. You know, that's too much of a compromise. Nobody would say that. And as a finishing note, I must say that no, I don't believe that every single modern release of a no title needs to be remastered. Not saying that. The issue here is always going to be the price. You know, if you're going to release old stuff, people say legacy stuff, but hey, it's old stuff. Old, call it like it is. You know, if you're going to release old stuff, then give people very reasonable pricing. Otherwise, you know, if you're gonna bump it up, then you gotta step it up. You know, you bump up the price, you step up what you offer. That is how it works. And still, Metal Gear Solid Master Collection, people are gonna say, well, that was the only way that people had, you know, that modern audiences had to play those games for the very first time. Why do you think that Konami did that fucking slack job? That is exactly the answer. That was the only way for people to play those games in modern consoles, so they were very comfortable fucking it up because, well, it's either this or nothing for those of you who didn't know anything of emulation. And that's a huge portion of player. You know, if you've been messing around with emulation for as long as I have, then you may be under the false illusion that emulation is a commonplace thing. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's very popular, but not everybody knows how to mess around with an emulator. Most people are still that thing. They buy a game, they buy a system, they buy a game, they sit on the couch and just play it. So a lot of people also don't know about any of those graphical improvements, those easy to make graphical improvements that you and I are aware of. And that's exactly what those fucking companies like fucking Konami take advantage of. And also, I know I said as a finishing note just a few moments, I swore to myself that, today was going to be the fucking day where I talk about, for good, put it out like it is. If something happens to my channel, then it fucking does. I don't give a right. What do you think that would be of the gaming industry, not the community, if it wasn't for emulation? About the interest in video games. Do you think it would be as hot or strong? It wouldn't, would it? Because a lot of YouTubers, when they start out, they don't have a lot of gear, so they think, well, I want to talk about video games, but I don't necessarily have, let's say, a dual machine system. Having one to stream, having one to capture, having one to this, while the other one does that. Or I don't have the equipment required to do more modern stuff, so I'll start with emulation, with retro gaming, and I'll pick it up from there. Now, a lot of people, they will work exclusively on retro content, even though, eventually they grow up and have a lot of resources, they grow financially. That's what I meant. But, the starting point for, I'm gonna say like at least 80% of the channels ends up being retro gaming for whatever reason, be it because you love retro gaming or because it's what you're able to do at that point, because those things, they take almost no resources to get you going, to get you into producing videos, into making. So there's also that aspect. What do you think of, what do you think YouTube gaming would be if it wasn't for emulation? How many hundreds of thousands or whatever channels would never have existed in the first place if it hadn't been for this? How much of a revenue this platform would be losing for it? Do you know what I'm getting at? Do you see what I'm getting at? Now, I'm not saying that we should emulate everything no matter what. No, this isn't what I'm saying. If it's a game that's very easily available, and if it's a modern game, then hey, go out, get the system and do it. But if we're talking about old pieces of retro game that you have to, old pieces of games that you have to get out of your way just to be able to play it, sometimes maybe even shelling out hundreds of dollars, then that's a no. I'm sure that most of you, 99% of you, understood this throughout this video, but there's always that one motherfucker who won't miss out on an opportunity. But anyway, this is what I had to say about retro gaming, about emulation. I believe I covered all of it. And if you like help funding the show, if you like help sponsoring more projects like this, then I invite you to be on the lookout, because for some reason recently I lost my monetization on YouTube. I did nothing wrong. I got no strikes. I got no whatever. I didn't even get a warning. They didn't tell me what the fuck happened. And be on the lookout, because I'm setting up a system for you to make donations if you choose to, until I can hopefully solve this matter, because I always take great care not to fall for this, for this not to happen to my channel, but alas, it did. So this was Bauman speaking to you. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to support the channel right now, then you can subscribe and leave a comment and a like. That's already a lot. That's already very good. That already helps tremendously. Okay? So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next round. Later.